Hey, everybody, I'm 90s Watch's Chris Bianchi, and we're going to be now talking about some Denver Nuggets basketball. Obviously, getting to the second round of the postseason. Bit of a disappointing end, though, as they got swept by the Phoenix Suns. So a bit of a rough end to that. But to kind of wrap things up on the Nuggets season, look ahead to the draft, look ahead to free agency, and of course, look ahead to next season. And hopefully, we'll get Jamal Murray back in the next couple of months. We're now joined by the host of the LockedOn Nuggets podcast, Matt Moore, who joins us for a few minutes here to catch up here on the Denver Nuggets. And Matt, first of all, appreciate you joining us. Second of all, kind of want to delve into it. Give us a bit of a broad overview, state of the Denver Nuggets. Obviously, disappointing second round loss, but you lose Jamal Murray, the Nuggets' second best player. Where do the Nuggets stand, and what do they need to do this offseason?
I think they're in a good position. I mean, you look back and the brief period in between the Aaron Gordon trade and Jamal Murray's injury, the Nuggets were really the best team in the league. Like, that was a consensus, and that's a consensus among executives around the league as well. I had several executives mention, before the Murray injury, we were really concerned about Denver because they just looked so unstoppable. So obviously going to be without Murray for quite a while. They've got to do some internal development. They need to get Zeke Naji kind of up to speed. We'll see what they do with their draft pick late in the first round. They do need to get, I think, some development done on MPJ as well. But the biggest thing is this team needs rest. They went through 2 playoff series in 10 months. Nikola Jokic playing all 72 games, heavy minutes in the playoffs. He needs a rest. The other players need a rest. They have some offseason priorities they're going to have to address with Will Barton and a couple of other players. But largely, provided that they can be able to replace Barton or keep him and keep the rest of the roster healthy, knock on wood, there's no reason the Nuggets shouldn't be considered title contenders going into next season after they get Jamal Murray back.
Joined by a LockedOn Nuggets podcast host, Matt Moore, here for an in-depth look at the Denver Nuggets. As you mentioned there, a couple of kind of key facets. One thing that stands out to me is Nikola Jokic, of course, the Nuggets' best player, the reigning MVP, first time the Nuggets have ever had an MVP in franchise history. But he decided not to play for Team Serbia here in the Summer Olympics. And you mentioned that rest component. I would imagine that Jokic sitting out for the Summer Olympics is probably good news for the Nuggets, right?
Yeah, he needs a break. Just mentally, I think even more than physically. Jokic, just the duration of the season, coming off of another playoff run, a deep playoff run to the conference finals, a short off season, and then immediately back into a 72-game season, which he was one of the few players to play all 72. Heavy minutes in the regular season and then in the playoffs. He needs a mental break more than anything. He's also got some family time he needs to spend. I think that this is going to do wonders for him. Serbia fans are obviously very disappointed, but this is really what's best for his career. He needs to be able to get a rest going into next season so that he doesn't, the mental side can wind up affecting the physical side a lot of times with players. And so as durable as Jokic is, the rest has been hard earned and very much needed.
And looks like he got a bit of a rest on that chariot with the on horseback out in his native Serbia. If you missed the photo, Nikola Jokic was on horseback in Serbia and using that kind of lovable personality that everyone has come to love here in Denver. But Jokic kind of missing the sidekick there, of course. That's the big, I wouldn't need to say elephant in the room. We all know about it. Jamal Murray tearing his ACL back in April and losing him. I guess I know you alluded to it at the start of things here, Matt, but when do you expect that Jamal Murray will be back? And second of all, can we expect him to be close to 100% when he does return, or close to the Jamal Murray that we all know and love?
So the Nuggets are not going to provide any sort of even a vague update. He'll be back when he's back and when he's fully ready. I'll say this. ACL injuries, oftentimes, while there are different durations, you can have more complicated injuries. I'm sure Nuggets fans will remember the Danilo Gallinari debacle that happened with him trying an experimental surgery. That's not happening with Murray, obviously. But a lot of this is, I have seen players come back early if they attack their rehab with zest and vigor. Jamal Murray is one of the hardest working guys you're going to find in the league, and he absolutely loves to play. My expectations would be closer to the All-Star break than further away from it. I wouldn't expect him much sooner than the All-Star break. If it takes until March, okay. If it gets into April, you're now concerned about having him in conditioning speed for the playoffs. But I think the biggest key here is he'll be back and it'll help. He won't be the same guy for a while. It's going to take a while after knee surgery. It's not just the surgery, it's the rehab time and the time away from the game and how long it takes to get back into game shape. All of those factors play in. There's been research that's basically showed the players, honestly, after major knee surgery, don't necessarily look like themselves for about 10 months after. I think 2021, 22 is probably when he's going to look closer to 80% when he comes back this season. But 22, 23, I would expect Jamal Murray to look just like he did, if not better, with all the time that he'll spend working to improve his game.
So with that in mind, by the way, we're joined by the host of the Denver Nuggets Locked On podcast, Matt Moore, here for an in-depth look at the Denver Nuggets, of course, getting to the second round of the postseason, finishing as number 3 seed last year, but a bit of a disappointing end as they got swept by the Phoenix Suns in the second round of the playoffs. Kind of backing that up a little bit and looking ahead to next year, if Jamal Murray is not going to really be Jamal Murray pretty much all of next year, what are realistic expectations for the Nuggets? And I guess the big question is, are they legitimate championship contenders?
They are. I genuinely believe that there's a very good chance the Nuggets win the title next year. Even with Murray coming back from the injury, it's about matchups and dynamics and what Murray brings in terms of his tenaciousness and shot making, as well as just the ability to run pick and roll. I mean, you saw the absence of that. It took the Nuggets a while to be able to find out how to attack that versus Portland. And when they did with Monte Morris, that turned that series. The Suns defense was better than the Blazers by a wide margin. And that's one of the reasons they were swept. Murray fundamentally changes that dynamic. It forces defenses to have to respect him off the dribble in space. And that means there's more room for Jokic. And so you have to bring help. And when you bring help, that means Jokic is passing to cutters and shooters. I also think it's very likely that the Nuggets not overhaul, but adjust the rotation and the roster in the offseason based off of the fact that when they made the trade for Aaron Gordon, they sent out 2 guards in Gary Harris and RJ Hampton that they liked quite a bit and that were a big part of their success, particularly Harris through the years. But that meant that they were actually pretty short on guards, which is why Austin Rivers, signed off the street, wound up starting for the Denver Nuggets in the playoffs. It really cannot be emphasized enough how shorthanded the Nuggets backcourt was. Monte Morris played really well in the Blazers series, struggled a lot more versus the Suns. They didn't get Will Barton back until game 3. He played well in games 3 and 4, but was on minutes restriction. And by that point, it was honestly a little too late. Having an overhauled backcourt, I think, will help considerably. There's also now is the time when the Nuggets can look for both internal development from Zeke Naji, but also look at opportunities to augment with veterans on the free agency market to fill in some of those gaps. I think there's a very good chance that the Nuggets have their best shot at a title in franchise history next season, provided that everyone else stays healthy.
Wow, that's, I suppose, kind of reasonably optimistic, at least based on my perception, considering how the Nuggets finished the season. But by the way, this is Matt Moore joining us, the host of the Denver Nuggets Locked On podcast. We take a look back at the Nuggets season in 2021, look ahead to 2021, 22. And coming up here in a few weeks is free agency. You mentioned some of those potential overhauls. And then, of course, on July the 29th, got the NBA draft as well. Nuggets, the 26th pick in the first round. It's their only pick. I suppose combining both of those factors here, Matt, what do the Nuggets need to do and what do you expect them to do? And feel free to take your time. It's obviously a pretty loaded question.
So, I mean, the big key, I think, the draft coming before free agency, which has been a source of contention with GMs for a while. They would rather the draft came after free agency so they know what their roster looks like. But the draft coming before free agency is going to make it a complicated question. The Nuggets obviously pick late. Now, they will be adding a G League team this season out of Grand Rapids. That's going to allow them with an opportunity to actually develop players in the G League. So some of these players that need more time, they can take a project maybe with that pick. But the question here is the Nuggets have committed future draft assets to the Magic for the Aaron Gordon trade and Oklahoma City down the line as well. So you have a shortage of pick opportunities coming up. You need that talent because of Michael Porter Jr. is eligible for an extension this summer. And you would assume the Nuggets will try and secure one for him, given how talented he is. Aaron Gordon is eligible for an extension as well. Do you lock in both those players to long-term deals? Will Barton and JaMychal Green both have player options? I would expect for Will Barton to at least heavily consider, if not outright opt out of his deal for next season, exercise the player option, or I'm sorry, decline the player option and enter free agency. Barton was a starter and was very good. He was a big reason that those minutes after the Aaron Gordon trade worked so well. The attention paid to all the other players meant that Barton was able to get easy looks all the time. So if Barton were to depart in free agency, they would obviously need to look to replace his scoring impact as well as some size on the wing. JaMychal Green, meanwhile, did give them valuable minutes off the bench as the small ball 5 option, as well as playing some power forward. There's a lot of things on the Nuggets plate this offseason, and they'll have to address it. The draft is probably not going to find them the kind of impact player they're going to need at these spots, but you also wonder if they will look to maybe fill some gaps so that they have young talent ready to take over in case they lose some veterans down the line. Finally, Paul Millsap as well, his deal is up and he'll be an unrestricted free agent. There's a lot of questions about whether or not Millsap, who I believe wants to stay in Denver, but would have to be for the right price, will be back with the Nuggets next season.
Well, that's a lot. I guess the first thing that comes to mind is we're joined by Matt Moore, the host of the Denver Nuggets Locked On podcast, as we look back on the Nuggets season a year ago and look ahead to the offseason and beyond. I think when it comes to MPJ, Michael Porter Jr., that's really one of the more intriguing questions, isn't it? As he's eligible for that extension, but you kind of saw the good and the bad, didn't you? I mean, he's an elite scorer, elite shooter, but defensively, they're big questions, right?
Yeah, I think the playoffs really showed that he's still got a ways to go in terms of his on-ball action as well. He scoffed at a question that I asked him after the season was over about how they attacked his handle and what he's going to need going into the offseason. But it's pretty clear he's going to need to add some on-ball skills. He's an exceptional shooter. He's elite. I mean, he is a 3-level scorer that scores at such a high efficiency. It's stuff that we've very rarely seen in this league ever. And at 6'10", that gives him a huge advantage. But he struggled with his hands. He struggled on lobs and he struggled on offensive rebounds, holding on to the ball. Those are both things that he's going to have to work on in the offseason, as well as developing more of a 3-level game. So the question about the extension, though, ultimately, this is a 6'10", 50, 40, 90 shooter. Those don't come by in the NBA very often. And while he tweaked his back in the second round, that's the first even half significant, he did play through it, back injury that he's had since his problems before he was drafted. He's shown a good work ethic. He's obviously a very confident young man, but that's for a reason. So I believe the Nuggets will probably likely come to an extension for a lot of money for MPJ, simply based off of the fact that I'm not sure that even if they were to trade him, they could possibly get anybody better than what he projects as. By year 4 or 5 of his career, it's possible MPJ really is one of the most elite scorers in the NBA.
Wow. And by the way, with the confidence, I mean, it's something you kind of need too at the same time. I know it can be a double-edged sword. You don't want to kind of bleed over into arrogance, but you definitely need some of that swagger, some of that confidence there. And talking about Michael Porter Jr., the 22-year-old, as you mentioned, 6'10" shooter who can really shoot the lights out. Kind of move over to maybe a bit of a different acquisition with Aaron Gordon coming over. And we saw, again, some of those pros and some of those cons. I guess the big question to me, off the top of my head, is Aaron Gordon a centerpiece for a championship contender, or is he more of a role player? What's your view?
Well, I think that your role players have to be kind of core to a championship team. Like, you need those key role players, no matter who it is. Like, you need those guys to do those things. I think Gordon struggled, to really get comfortable in the offensive system. I think a full offseason and a preseason, as the Nuggets build more stuff in for him. This season, you couldn't do it. You had no practice time. You're playing games every other night in what was a very hectic and demanding NBA schedule. This season, I think that there'll be more practice time built in, but even just the preseason work, the stuff that they'll do in late August and early September before media day, they'll install more systems to get Aaron Gordon better and more confident looks. Gordon brought a ton defensively. The difference in the Nuggets was very stark before he arrived and after. They were good. They were on a winning streak before he arrived, but after, it really unlocked a lot because he is a threat you have to respect on cuts. He is a player that you have to give some respect to in terms of his scoring acumen, especially off the dribble on getting passes for cuts and things like that. Shooting wise, he had a bad playoffs, but he was also asked to do a lot on the defensive end with the injuries that they sustained. So I think it's very possible that Gordon thrives next season. The question is going to be, Gordon's due to be a free agent in the summer of 2022. And the question is, Is he going to want to look around? That seems likely. Most players want that experience of being a free agent and being wooed and wowed. At the same time, the Nuggets did commit assets and really believe that he's part of what can bring them to a championship level. This is the first time that Gordon has played winning basketball really in his career, in the NBA at least. So there's a lot to kind of factor in here. If he does not sign an extension this summer, that really makes next year all in. You have to go in next year because you don't know if you're going to be able to retain Gordon. And after the extensions to MPJ, presumably, and with Jokic and Jamal Murray on large long-term contracts, their options are going to be limited. So next year, one of the reasons I think that they're probably going to be a championship contender, they've got to be, because the window gets much more narrow going forward, depending on what happens next season.
So I guess going back to a bit of a broad view, as we're joined here by Matt Moore, the host of the Denver Nuggets Locked On podcast, for obviously a look back here on the Nugget season, looking ahead to the offseason. When it comes to Nuggets, how would you prioritize the things they need to do? We've obviously gone over a lot. You got Aaron Gordon, you got MPJ, potentially getting an extension. What do you prioritize, and do you think it's feasible to get as many as 2 or 3 of those players locked up long term?
I think it all depends on what ownership wants to do. If they're willing to pay after not having a TV deal and losing the revenue from fans, being in the arena during the pandemic across multiple sports, if they're willing to invest in a championship core, I think you absolutely do it. I think they've proven this team can win. Even for a short period of time. It'd be one thing if this team had won a lot after the trade but hadn't looked good, and if it had been a lot of close wins versus bad teams. That wasn't it. They were dominant. They had a dominant win over the Clippers. They had good wins over good teams, and their numbers were absolutely incredible. And everyone seemed to be really vibing the confidence. I've never seen the Nuggets higher in my almost 10 years of covering the team. So I think that you have to take care of stuff in-house first. And then the next priority really is adding veterans so that you've got more options. A lot of what we're seeing in these playoffs is it's not necessarily how good your offense or defense is. Can you solve the problems in front of you? Can you attack a Jazz team well enough? If you're the Jazz, if you can't attack a small ball switch system with Rudy Gobert, how good can you really be? The Nuggets have the ability to do that on multiple levels, but they do need some key role players to be able to fill in. Now, they might get that from internal development from not only Zeke Naji, but PJ Dozier, who missed the entire postseason and would have been really helpful in that series versus the Suns. Not a name that I think really stands out in the marquee, but Dozier brings athleticism, defense, and playmaking. And those are things that the Nuggets really needed in that series. They've got a lot of things to address. The key, I think, for the front office is they're going to have to decide, are the guys that we have that are young and developing going to be good enough, or do we need to make moves to add veterans? They're a team that everyone knows is in that conversation, at least for the title, at least to compete for the Western Conference title. And if they're there, that's going to make them more attractive to free agents who might be willing to come on cheaper deals in order to try and make a run at a title. Do they make some of those, or do they simply run it back? Do they look at a big other swing? They have Aaron Gordon, they have MPJ. Do you look at other trade options? I don't think those are likely. I think the most likely scenario is they run it back next season, given how successful they were. But the front office is going to have to assess, with Jokic playing at this level, at an MVP, top 5 player in the league level, you are a championship contender now. How much do you go in? And then the next question is ownership willing to pay for you to go all in? If both those things are true, the Nuggets will be well set up, but they're still going to have to make decisions around the margins, because you no longer can take flyers and attempts here. You need to be very sure that the team that you have is ready to step up if injury occurs and can fill in the margins to be the difference in playoff series to get you to a title.
Has the Nuggets ownership given us any sort of indication? Have the Cronkies given us a lean about whether or not they're willing to invest in some of these younger players?
The answer from official is yes. Obviously, they will always pay if they know that they can win a championship. That's what every ownership group in the NBA says. But I'll say this: the kind of history of the Cronkies has been largely in my time that they're willing to pay for players. It's been more of the decisions in terms of basketball operations and things like that. That's where things have been maybe not as paid for. That's one of the reasons why they got Tim Connelly, was because Masai Ujiri left for what was ultimately a bigger deal. However, you can't really blame the Nuggets, since Tim Connelly has since become one of the best executives in the league. Now, this gets more expensive with Michael Malone. He's due for an extension. He's up after next season. That's going to have to be a factor in these conversations. They need to have a new practice facility. There's all these costs that come along with it. And again, we can't overstate the impact that the pandemic is having, not only on the Kroenkes, but every NBA owner. That's one of the things that's interesting about this offseason is there's a lot of teams that say we just simply don't know what the finances are going to look like after the chaos of the last 18 months. So we'll see how it all plays out. But the Nuggets have always indicated that if the team was at a championship contention level, which there's no way you can really argue this team isn't fully healthy, that they've been willing to pay. So the question is going to be, are they willing to do it now? Do they wait until Aaron Gordon's a free agent and risk it? Do you risk the idea of putting MPJ into restricted free agency, matching an offer for him, but that ultimately can lead to him maybe deciding to leave down the line? We've seen that before. If you do not just go outright and say, yes, we'll give you the max, we love you, we want to keep you, those players remember that later in their careers. These are all part of the decisions the front office is going to have to balance going into the offseason.
Well, that is certainly quite a bit to balance there if you're Josh Kroenke and Tim Connelly and the whole Nuggets front office, I guess. And guess we'll kind of close or begin to close with this as we're joined by Matt Moore, the host of the Nuggets Locked On podcast. Matt, any final thoughts or things that we haven't touched on about the Nuggets offseason? Any big burning questions in your mind?
Yeah, I think I've mentioned a couple of times. Tim Connelly mentioned Zeke Naji the other day, and he was a guy that played really well in the middle of the season. And he was mentioned and faded out, hit the rookie wall, and then didn't play in the playoffs. And that's understandable. Malone's got a tight rotation. They've got high expectations, and rookies tend to struggle. I think there's a lot of expectations that Naji will take a step up next season, whether that's into a small ball 5 option as he continues to literally grow, as he's still a young man and have strength training within an NBA system, or if it's more on the wing, which he showed a capability to do this season as well. They've got to decide what to do with Bol Bol, who really hasn't panned out for a number of reasons. That's going to have to be a tough conversation given what is a pretty impressive skill set, but hasn't been able to put it together. They're going to have to figure out the rotation with, Facu Campazzo was loved by teammates, loved by coaches, but ultimately is a very undersized guard that struggles sometimes in playoff environments, had impacts early in both series and then faded as they went on. They have to really be able to, like I said, the biggest thing is they have to be sure that the rotation that they enter the next season with is the one that can win a title, because I do believe that with Jamal Murray, even if he's not 100% as good as he is, especially in playoff moments, I think he'll be great in the playoffs. With Jokic at this level, with what MPJ will bring as a third option versus a second option, which is what he was in these playoffs, and with Gordon as a fourth option versus a third, they are going to be impossible to stop offensively and have a much higher ceiling defensively. The pieces are there, but for the Nuggets, everything has to go right. And that's one of the things that we're seeing in these playoffs more than any other. You also have to build in time to keep Jokic healthy. He's had an incredible load on him, and he's been lucky and durable, but you have to make sure that you manage minutes for both him, Murray when he gets back, not overdoing it on MPJ or Gordon. The margins are very important when chasing an NBA title, and that's going to be the big key for the Nuggets in this offseason. They have the core, but they're going to have to manage the margins and the future very carefully to make sure it puts them in the best position to finally bring a title to Denver.
Well, honestly, that's kind of exciting to me. This got me kind of fired up for the Nuggets next season, and it'll be an interesting offseason, as you mentioned. The draft probably not so much, as you mentioned, 126th overall pick, and that's pretty much it for the Nuggets. But hey, Matt, we really appreciate a few minutes of your time. And again, Matt Moore from the Locked On podcast, host of the Denver Nuggets Locked On podcast. Go there for all of your Nuggets needs and wants. But Matt, more importantly, again, appreciate a few minutes of your time here. And we'll be doing this throughout the regular season. So thanks again.
Anytime, Chris. Thanks so much.